Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Misyk and Maat Sports Talk podcast. Today it's just me. Cody won't be here for the next couple episodes, it looks like. So we'll figure that out. I'm trying to book a guest for maybe next episode, or maybe it'll be another solo ep. We'll figure it out. But either way, you guys are still going to get your content. And today we got a lot of shit to talk about. It's not a lot of stories, but the one story is really hard hitting. This is just a trigger warning for anyone out there because this is going to be a really graphic and hard episode. I'm going to be talking about the sexual assault accusations and lawsuit and Kyle Beach, his story with the Chicago Blackhawks. So just a trigger warning for anyone who can't listen to this because this is a really hard. It's a hard thing to talk about, and it's an even harder thing to listen to. Like I'm having a hard time, like legitimately talking about this. Like this is probably the toughest thing that I know I've had to do since we started this podcast. Was just I'm really nervous to talk about this. Like, there's so much to this story, and it's a really tough conversation that we need to have. That's the tough thing about having a sports podcast is when stuff like this comes out, you got to talk about it. And like I know I strive to host a show that's really fun and light that people can laugh to and smile to, but this isn't going to be that episode. So if you don't think you can listen to this, feel free, please turn it off. And if you happen to share this with anyone, please give a heads up beforehand that this is not an easy conversation to have. So back in 2010, the Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup, and we know now here in 2021 that it's not as good as it seems. There's cases of sexual assault and abuse, bullying, covering up these horrific acts that have been dug. They dug a hole and buried it, and it hasn't came up for 10 years, and now it's here. And people are losing their jobs. People should be losing their jobs. There's still some people yet to lose their jobs. We're going to cover it here, even if it's a tough conversation, because you guys deserve to hear the real truth. And like, I don't have the real truth. I'm not an insider, obviously, but when stuff like this happens, it's mine and Cody's job and my job today to talk about it, even if it's a tough conversation. So I feel like a lot of people who listen to our show are pretty avid sports fans, but I know is some that aren't like overly into it and are kind of just listening, getting into it. So back in 2010, in the third round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Chicago Blackhawks assistant coach named Brad Aldridge, basically, I'm paraphrasing here because I don't want to mess it up, basically took a young, vulnerable player into his house or apartment to give him what he said was coaching advice, where he would later make sexual advances on this young man and later masturbate and ejaculate on him. And when he wanted to leave, he would threaten him with a baseball bat. And it left the player, who was named John Doe 1 in the legal cases, in paralyzed fear, which it would anyone. And that was covered up by the Blackhawks and the management and the whole organization for over a decade. And yesterday, the young man who's 10 years ago was a Chicago Blackhawk, did a interview with TSN revealing who he is and telling his story on the whole situation and what happened and what he thinks of it now. And I just want to shout out Kyle Beach. That's the young man whose life got changed forever that day, and it will never be the same. I'm having a really hard time talking about this, and I'm really nervous right now. Like, this is a really hard conversation. But Kyle Beach is a hero. He's a survivor. He's a voice. He's extremely brave and has a lot of courage to actually come out and tell his story. And I feel like he's a beacon of light, along with all the other survivors who've came out and told their story. It's really inspiring to see people kind of come together and support this man. Like, sexual assault happens to all genders of any age, and it's hard to tell your story when stuff like this happens. Like, I'm lucky enough where I haven't had to experience this, and I just can't relate to it. That's the tough part. But it was a really heart-wrenching and a teary-eyed interview with Kyle Beach and TSN telling his story. It's crazy, man. Like, thank you, Kyle Beach, for telling your story. He's extremely brave, and he will and already has changed hockey culture forever. Like, hockey culture is so horrible, and like, when you think about it, it's just a bunch of guys who want to be tough, and being vulnerable isn't overly accepted. And he is vulnerable, and he was vulnerable back in 2010, and nobody did anything about it. That can't happen. Nobody ever did something about it. People are now losing their jobs. More people are going to lose their jobs, as they should. Even the people... It's so hard to tell your story, and when the Blackhawks found out about this in the third round, they didn't want to say anything. They covered it up. They didn't want to go out about it and cause a distraction with the team. They chose winning over human beings. You can't do that. They decided that winning a Stanley Cup was more important than going out and stopping sexual abuse. Like, they didn't do anything with Brad Aldridge. And then a few weeks later, he assaulted someone else. They didn't fire him. They let him fucking walk out by himself. Then they gave him a letter of recommendation to go work at a high school where he assaulted more people. That's fucking slimy and dirty, and that shouldn't be let go. Like, this, he's a registered sex offender. And they could have stopped that. Like, what happened with Kyle, it happened. But they could have stopped with what happened with the next person and the person after that. Like, are you kidding me? It's not fair to him. It's not fair to anyone. The Chicago Blackhawks and the NHLPA let Kyle Beach down, and there's nothing that they can do that can fix that. What happened, and then they didn't do anything about it. They swept it under the rug. Winning a championship was more important to them than human beings' lives. It wasn't only Kyle Beach, it was the other people whose lives got changed forever. That's not fair. It he's the embodiment of courage, and I hope if anyone else out there is going through or is going through something like this, I hope that they can look at him or anyone else who's ever shared their story, and I hope it gives them the courage to actually come out and share their story. It's so hard, man. Something like this should never be forgiven. What Brad Aldridge and what the Chicago Blackhawks did to cover this up is unforgivable. People can't let this go, and we can't just let this die. Like, because stuff like this happens all over sports, not just hockey, happens all over the world. The difference is how it's handled. And this wasn't handled. This was swept under the rug like nothing happened. And there was all the Blackhawks players on that team deny it. They say they didn't know what happened. You're telling me you didn't know what happened? The players would verbally abuse this guy about this whole thing in the practices. Give me a break, you didn't know. Like some captain, Jonathan Taves. Like if people are making the argument that he was young at the time, but like if he's old enough to be a captain and a leader in the NHL, he should be old enough to know that sexual assault isn't okay, and he should stand up for that. Like, I'm not saying that he supports it, but he didn't do anything to stop it, and he didn't do anything he didn't say anything about it afterwards. Neither with Patrick Kane, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, you name it. Anyone on that 2010 team, other than Nick Boynton and Ben Sopel. Those are the only people that Kyle Beach says were really there for him. The only people that stood by his side. Kyle Beach has spent 10 years with people not believing him. And the Chicago Blackhawks have spent the last 10 years becoming what people say is a dynasty. Like they prioritized winning over human beings, and I can't wrap my head around that, and I'm just blown away. That's not something that it shouldn't even be thought about, that people, it's just so fucked up. And like Stan Bowman, yeah, it's your first year, but weren't you like, he was like 38 when he was in his first year. You know a lot younger than 38 that's not acceptable. I'm fucking 17 and I've known that for a long time. Like, it's just a bunch of people not wanting to admit that they covered up sexual assault and basically condoned it. Like, obviously no one came out and said, yeah, do this thing, but actions speak louder than words, don't you think? Like, by not doing anything, they have changed people's lives forever, and it's not fair to them. Gary Bettman and now Florida Panthers head coach Joe Quenneville. Sorry, the J names. Joel Quenneville and Gary Bettman had a meeting. Quenneville was the head coach of that 2010 Chicago team, and he was the coach for them for a long time. He had to have known. If the allegations are true of the players verbally abusing him in practices, how can he not know? Unless he's incompetent at his job. And I don't think so. I think he just tried to cover that up. It's hard to admit that you're wrong. A lot of people struggle with that. But this is a scenario where the stakes are so high that they're wrong and they just refuse to admit it. Like, the players are still coming out and saying that they had no recollection of that happening. Where were you then? Like, give me a break. The Blackhawks ultimately put winning over human beings, and the fact that they won the Stanley Cup just covered it up even more. Like, they didn't do anything about it, and then they won the Stanley Cup. Winning doesn't make everything go away all the time. Like, this will never go away for Kyle Beach or anyone else. This isn't something that can happen. And there's still people employed today in the NHL who are a part of that front office that let that happen. It's been reported that the Panthers are going to look for a new coach, which means Joel Quenneville will be out. But he coached last night. This came out yesterday. There's no reason why he should have been coaching an NHL game last night. Are you kidding me? He can't take a leave of absence? Like, fuck. I just don't understand how he could coach one more game after that came out. And, like, yeah, he's being replaced now, but, like, a little too late. Like, I'm not saying anything about the Panthers organization because I obviously don't know, but, like, tell me the assistant coach couldn't run one game? Like, it's one game. How is he going behind that bench for even another fucking second? And the Winnipeg Jets still have Kevin Cheveldayoff as their GM. He's still got his meeting with Gary Bettman. You'd assume that he'd be let go if things follow suit, like everything else has. But he shouldn't. He's still the guy behind the phones. If someone wants to make a trade, they call him. A guy who condones sexual assault. Like, I don't know why these people still have their jobs right now. I know Mark Bergevin was a part of that team too. Get him out of here. Kyle Beach got his career cut short, and frankly, his whole life has been changed forever. And these people who just let it happen are still in the fucking league doing what they want. You'd expect for Gary Bettman and the NHL to do something and get these people out of here finally, but who knows? The NHLPA should give a long, hard look at themselves too. A lot of fucked up stuff happens with the NHLPA that people don't talk about. Like, it's not all about getting players their money. Like, look what happened to Rick Rippin a long time ago with the Vancouver Canucks. Nothing. They didn't do anything. Look what happened with Jimmy Hayes. Look what happened with Kyle Beach. Where was the NHLPA? It's the Players Association. Like, where are they in this time of need? It's not fair. It's their job and they're not there. They're there to support the players and they're not there. I don't know what to say. Like, it's just not fair. Like, why are they there? Like, if they're not going to do their job. The whole Blackhawks organization from the 2010 run and down has all been removed other than the owners, but Jenner and Block, the firm doing the investigation on the whole thing, said that they believe the Wirtz family who owns the Blackhawks, that they genuinely didn't know. So if that's the case, then yeah, fine. But like everyone else knew and they covered it up. There's players still on that team that are still playing today. Played yesterday. Like, come on. Let's do something about this. It's not fair. I've lost a lot of respect for players on that team who refuse to admit it and never came out and stood by Kyle Beach's side. A lot of it's Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, and Duncan Keith. Especially Jonathan Toews, like, he's the captain. And yesterday, after his post game comments, obviously they asked him about this, and he still said that Stan Bowman and John McDonough were good guys. Are you kidding me? They covered up sexual assault. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, obviously people slip up with their words. Like, I've obviously slipped up before. I've probably messed up on the podcast before. But you can't justify going out there and defending people who covered up and condoned sexual assault in the workplace and in life. Like, you can't do that. Chicago Blackhawks, they were fined $2 million by the NHL for this whole thing, which is less than the New Jersey Devils got fined for having a fucked up contract with Ilya Kovalchuk. The NHL fined him $1 million less for covering up and sexual assault than a fucked up contract. Like, where does the NHL stand on this? Like, how can they justify finding them $1 million less? It's a contract versus fucking human beings. Like, give me a break. It's not fair. I don't get it. And this isn't anything new either. Like, sexual assault and shit like this happens all over the world, and I guarantee you all over sports, but like, they didn't do anything about it. How's things gonna change if you don't do anything? Like, and maybe I'm just some guy yelling in a fucking podcast booth to himself, but like, that's unforgivable. Like, these are people's lives, and you're not giving them the support that they need, and it's not fair. I know I've said it's not fair multiple times, but it's just, I can't reiterate that point enough. Like what can you do to make this up to Kyle Beach? Nothing. What you could have done was deal with it in the past instead of covering it up. There's nothing you could do now that could change his over a decade of living with this. And to think the Chicago Blackhawks even let Brad Aldridge have his day with a cup, where he brought it to a high school. Like, they picked the side of a sexual abuser over their players and the victim. And that's not just one person, that's not just two people, that's a whole organization full of people and players that are in the wrong here, and they should all be held accountable to it. This shouldn't be let go. It's not fair to anyone. It's fucked up too. and I don't know the whole legal side to this because I'm not a lawyer. I'm just some kid who does a hockey podcast every once a week. But I only know the moral side of this, and it's fucked up, and it can't be let go. People need to keep pushing this. We can't let the Blackhawks off the hook for something that should never be forgiven. People can forgive, but people will never forget this. And I just encourage everyone, if you haven't already, please go watch or listen to Kyle Beach's interview with TSN yesterday. Even Sheldon Kennedy's interview with Carolyn Cameron in Sportsnet last night. Real tough stuff. Heart-wrenching, emotional, real shit. And I just don't know. I don't feel like I could talk about this much more. Like I'm surprised I even got to 26 minutes because this is a really difficult thing to talk about, especially solo. And it's just like, what more can you say? Like the Chicago Blackhawks they fucked up. They didn't do it right. They did nothing here right. Winning a Stanley Cup isn't that important. I don't think people realize that. I'm the biggest hockey fan in the world. It's not that important. This is real fucking life. That's sports. And I get it. That's like people's dreams. It used to be my dream when I was a lot younger. But in no circumstance should this be looked over when you have a chance for success. It's not how that works. I don't know, man. This might be the most real I've been on this podcast throughout its entire existence. And I just don't know. Shout out to Kyle Beach. He's an absolute hero, and I know and I'm sure everyone else stands behind him and supports him through this entire thing. He's incredibly brave. And the Chicago Blackhawks genuinely let down Kyle Beach. And no amount of apologizing, I'm sure, will be able to fix what happened. There's not much more to talk about in sports. World Series is going on 2-0. 1-1 between the Braves and the Astros. It just doesn't feel right talking about anything else other than this. So I think this is going to be an uber short episode, obviously. Sorry for the tough and difficult show here. But this is what we got to do. When stuff like this happens, we can't let it go away, and we need to talk about it. I don't feel right talking about anything else other than this, because this is the story. This is the most important thing in sports right now. And it's going to be the most important thing on this show today. So I'm sorry for the more difficult episode and the shorter episode. I'll be back this next week. We'll figure out a day. Cody probably won't be here. Stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for listening. If you've made it this far, please show your support for Kyle Beach and anyone you know or know of who's going through this or have gone through this. Please show your support. We're not going to let this go away. Obviously, If anything else comes up with the story, it'll be talked about. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe to the channel and the SoundCloud. Follow our Instagram, Misyk And Maat Sports Talk. Thank you guys.